In my family, getting hired as a mailroom clerk was the career equivalent of announcing you joined a medieval jousting troupe. Well, it's a start, my dad said, dragging the words out like he was choking on them. My mom smiled like she was trying to find the silver lining in a parking ticket. At least it's a job, sweetheart. That's more than some people have. And Derek, my older brother, pride of the family, corporate lawyer with cufflinks that cost more than my rent, just looked up from his phone long enough to say, "You still have to wear a name tag, right?" He said it like I was enlisting in the fast food infantry. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I knew if I didn't, I'd snap. Crying in front of Derek was a sport he trained for. I didn't expect a marching band or anything. But a congratulations would have been nice. A genuine, "We're proud of you." Something other than the vibe of, "Well, he didn't die." That's something. I was 22, fresh out of community college, living in a shared apartment with a broken AC and a roommate who thought paper towels were an all-purpose cleaning product. Towridge Logistics was the first place that didn't ghost me after the second interview. So yeah, I took the mailroom job. Happily. My first day smelled like toner, cardboard, and the kind of coffee that tastes like disappointment. My uniform was 2 sizes too big, and the ID badge photo made me look like I'd just been rescued from a basement. But none of that mattered. Because I was in. Not in a glamorous way. No corner office, no handshake from the CEO. Just me, a pushcart full of interoffice envelopes, and an access badge that worked exactly 60% of the time. And yet, I was stupidly proud. The mailroom was tucked in the basement, just past the supply closet that held enough printer paper to choke a moose. There were 2 other guys working down there, one who spent most of his shift watching TikToks on mute, and another who referred to himself in third person like he was his own brand. Nobody really talked to us. We were the shadows of the corporate ecosystem, people who existed solely to ferry toner cartridges and Amazon boxes to people who forgot we had names. But while I wheeled my cart from floor to floor, I listened. I paid attention. I started to learn who was who. Which departments hated each other. Which execs barked orders and which ones smiled at the janitors. I knew who stayed late every night, who padded their expense reports, and who thought the break room was a personal fridge. Nobody noticed me. And that was perfect. Because invisibility is underrated. Especially when you're trying to understand a system built to ignore you. I'd go home, crack open a notebook, and write it all down. Names. Job titles. Complaints I overheard while refilling the paper trays. Patterns. Vibes. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I knew I wanted more than the mailroom. Not because it was beneath me, but because I was capable of more. And because I was tired of being the other son. Growing up, Derek got praise like it was piped through the vents. AP classes, private SAT tutors, school trips to Europe. Me? I got a pat on the back and, "Just make sure you're not a burden." At holiday dinners, he'd hold court about mergers and acquisitions while I refilled water glasses. He got business cards. I got, "At least he's working." Energy. I wasn't dumb. I just took longer to figure out the map. So I studied. Not in school. In life. In spreadsheets abandoned on copiers. In the way managers replied to emails with passive aggression so refined it belonged in a museum. I watched. Learned. Absorbed. And every time someone said, "Oh, mailroom guy, right?" I smiled and nodded. Because people drop their guard around the mailroom guy. They talk. They reveal things. And I never forgot any of it. At home, my parents still asked questions like, "So how's the sorting?" and, "Any plans to move up?" The same way they'd ask if I was thinking of trying dairy again after a bad experience. Derek told me once, over Thanksgiving turkey, "Just don't get stuck. Mailroom jobs are a trap." As if I didn't know that already. But I wasn't stuck. I was observing. Building. Sharpening the blade. I didn't have the title. But I had the map. And one day, I'd use it. Not to prove anything to them. But to remind myself, I never needed their permission to be more. If corporate hierarchy had a caste system, I was born into the untouchable class, with a clipboard. There's something fascinating about how people treat you when they think you're background noise. It's like being furniture that occasionally coughs. People dropped all sorts of nuggets around me, complaints, secrets, passive-aggressive rants about upper management, even a whispered HR violation by a guy who absolutely thought I didn't exist. It was better than a promotion. Because while Derek and my parents were off assuming I was licking stamps and chasing down delivery guys who forgot the bubble wrap, I was slowly becoming a one-man reconnaissance unit. The best part? No effort required. Just sorting mail. Holding a clipboard. Nodding like I cared about toner shortages. But quietly? I was tracking everything. People's routines. Shipment delays. Who got bonuses. One guy, Chad from marketing, used Chad 1234 for every login. I didn't hack anything, I just noticed when he left it visible on a sticky note. Twice. At home, I wrote fake project ideas just to practice. Optimize flow between Chicago and Phoenix hubs. I had no title, no team, no real power. But I wanted to be ready. Just in case. And no one asked? Not yet. One Tuesday, delivering to floor 6, the ops wing that always smelled like old cologne, I heard two managers griping about delays. The tracking date is useless, one said. We're 3 days behind to Charlotte again. I paused, dropped their envelopes on the desk, then casually added, might be a syncing issue between vendor timestamps and our logs. They blinked. Sorry, I said. Just overheard something similar last week. Then I pushed the card away like it was nothing. 2 days later, someone from ops came to the mailroom. Clipboard. Suit. Polite smile. You're Eli? Yeah? Who told you about the syncing thing? No one. I shrugged. Just noticed a pattern. He left without much else. I figured that was it. A week later, my manager called me into a room with a window. By mailroom standards, that meant I'd ascended. They offered me a temp rotation assisting the logistics coordinator. Just 6 weeks, basic file transfers, schedule cleanup. I got a badge that opened 2 more doors and a chair that didn't squeak. At home? I didn't mention it. Because I knew what they'd say. So, not in the mailroom anymore? My mom would ask cautiously, like I was recovering from something shameful. Dad would ask if it was real logistics, or just tech support. Derek would ask if I still needed help understanding Excel. I still showed up to Sunday dinners, the kind where love is served with a side of condescension. Derek talked mergers. Mom bragged about his holiday bonus like she got it herself. I refilled water glasses. That was my role. They still saw me as the backup plan. So I said nothing. Instead, I dove into logistics like it was a second language. Load balancing, route planning, maintenance cycles. I asked questions, took notes, stayed late. They thought I was just eager. Really, I was blueprinting. Because I didn't just want a better job. I wanted their whole system. Back in the mailroom, I kept quiet. They offered me a permanent role upstairs. I said I needed time to think. I wasn't stalling. I was planning. Because being underestimated for so long gives you 2 choices: let it define you, or let it camouflage you. So the next day, I walked into HR with a resume I'd rebuilt from scratch and said, I'm applying for the assistant logistics analyst position. The lady blinked. You're the mailroom clerk? Former, I said, smiling. Hopefully. She looked skeptical. But she took the paper. And for the first time, I stopped sorting their mail. And started sorting out my own future. The new badge was laminated, shiny, and didn't say mailroom anymore, just logistics division. But the first time I showed it to my mom, she squinted at it like it was a fake ID from a vending machine. So, are you like a junior manager now, or is it more like assistant to a manager? I'm on the analytics team, I said, already regretting it. She nodded like that meant still hourly. Derek wasn't better. When I mentioned I'd transitioned out of the mailroom, he actually laughed. Nice, man. Soon you'll be organizing pens in a cabinet marked strategic resources. I could have corrected them. Told them about the meetings I was now sitting in. How my workflow suggestions had just been integrated into our scheduling software. How I got my first company-wide acknowledgement in a Friday Digest email that my parents absolutely didn't read. But I didn't. Because invisibility had its perks. They still thought I was playing employee cosplay. Meanwhile, at work, things were changing fast. I was no longer just watching, I was contributing. Building dashboards, analyzing load times, identifying choke points in our supply chain. And when one regional manager tried to pass off a six-figure delay as just weather, I cross-referenced satellite data and internal timestamps and proved it was vendor error. Quietly. Professionally. With receipts. That earned me an invite to the quarterly review meeting, not to take notes, but to present. I showed up in a borrowed button-up, hair combed with more effort than usual, and watched from across the room as the same VP who once handed me his coffee cup thinking I was catering now nodded at my charts like I was worth listening to. Still, I didn't mention a word of it at home. Why? Because deep down, I wanted them to stay blind. Not out of pettiness. Well, okay, partly pettiness, but mostly because there's a certain pleasure in watching people underestimate you while you quietly pass them. Besides, Sunday dinners hadn't changed. Mom still opened with, "You still in that mail thing?" Like it was a club I couldn't get kicked out of. Dad still asked Derek for real advice about investing, despite me being the one who helped untangle an internal budgeting mess that saved our company 6 figures. And me? I smiled, nodded, and passed the mashed potatoes. Sometimes Derek would throw me a bone. "You know, Eli's got that corporate gig now." Then he'd turn to me. "What is it again? Labels? Inventory?" "Something like that," I'd say, sipping my water. They didn't want details. They wanted archetypes. And to them, I was still the kid with a walkie-talkie delivering toner cartridges. But in real life? I was building something. I started mentoring one of the interns, a kid named Luis who reminded me of myself, if I'd ever had someone believe in me. He was sharp, eager, and asked questions like, "How do you get people to listen if they think you're nobody?" My answer: "You don't. You let them talk, and when they mess up, you have a better solution ready. No one ignores results forever." We made a good team. The warehouse staff knew my name now. So did the procurement lead. My department lead started CCing me on regional emails, which meant I was officially in the "we might promote this guy soon" pipeline. But I still rode the elevator with the mail cart sometimes. Not because I missed it. Because I never forgot what it felt like to be in the basement, listening, learning, invisible. And I wasn't done being underestimated yet. The real twist was still coming. Because I'd just learned who was on the list for the upcoming restructuring initiative. And guess whose name was printed right underneath? Contract logistics consultant. Derek. Apparently, his firm had been contracted by Telridge. He was coming to consult on a departmental audit. At my company. In my building. Still thinking I sorted mail. Oh, this was going to be fun. Derek's email signature was longer than some TED Talks. Derek Mitchell, J.D., Corporate Strategy Consultant, Senior Partner, East Coast Division, Complex Restructuring and Organizational Design, him. He sent it to my department lead with a request to schedule preliminary floor interviews. For his audit, no subject line, just, "Let's cut dead weight." Classic Derek. I found out he was coming 2 weeks before he showed up. My manager pulled me aside after our team's sync and said, "Apparently, we're getting reviewed by some hotshot consulting firm. Guy's name is Mitchell. That ring a bell?" I nodded. "That's my brother." He blinked. "Wait, seriously?" "Unfortunately. Small world. Nightmare planet," I corrected. 2 days before Derek's arrival, I got looped into a prep meeting with mid-level managers. The goal? Create clean paper trails. Make things look efficient. Avoid saying anything that would encourage cuts. Halfway through, someone joked, "Watch, this consultant will probably treat us all like interns." I just smiled. He might. What I didn't say, he already treated me like that. The last time we'd spoken, Derek had compared my job to playing office. When I told him I worked in logistics, he smirked and said, "Like moving boxes around?" Now he was about to walk into my division and have no clue I was the guy his report would eventually pass through. And I wasn't about to tell him. Let him figure it out. Let him ask where the mail guy was. Let him trip. He arrived on a Thursday, tailored suit, overpriced watch, the same smug stride he perfected in high school debate club. He didn't even glance at the reception desk. Just walked straight through the doors like he was late for an episode of Suits. I watched from the break room as he greeted our department lead with a handshake I recognized, confident, practiced, a little too firm, like he was trying to remind the world he deserved to be in charge. He didn't recognize me at first. To be fair, I was in a button-down, no card in sight, and I didn't wave. Later, during his first walkthrough, he passed me in the hallway. Did a double take. Slowed. Eli? He said, confused, like he'd spotted a dog driving a car. Hey, I said casually. He looked around. You still work here? I do. Huh. I thought you were male, right? I smiled. Used to be. He squinted at my ID badge. Then blinked. You're in logistics now? Head of it. That made him pause. Like actually pause, like someone had unplugged the Wi-Fi in his brain. He recovered quickly, of course. Well, good for you, man. Climbing up. Something like that. He looked around like he'd lost his train of thought, then spotted my manager and wandered off with a quick, "We'll catch up later." Sure, Derek. Catch up. The next few days were beautiful. He gave presentations about synergy and resource alignment, completely unaware I had final say on most of the recommendations he was writing. At one point, he suggested merging 2 departments, not knowing I'd just gotten approval to expand them. I didn't correct him. I didn't need to. Instead, I asked pointed questions during review sessions. Quietly exposed gaps in his logic. Cited metrics he hadn't been given access to yet. He started avoiding eye contact. At lunch one day, he cornered me in the break room. You enjoying this? He asked. Enjoying what? Outranking me. I raised an eyebrow. Do I? You know what I mean. I didn't respond. He scoffed. Still holding a grudge, huh? No, I said. I'm just not correcting the record anymore. He shook his head, like I was the one acting unreasonable. Then left. Later that week, I got an email from HR. Request to review staffing recommendations submitted by external consultant. Attached? A list of names to cut. Near the top, Luis, the intern I'd been mentoring. And that's when I stopped being quiet. When I saw Luis's name on that list, something in me clicked, a calm, cold sort of clarity. Not rage. Not drama. Just done. Because this wasn't just about Luis. It was about people like us, the overlooked, the underestimated, the ones who get cut first because someone in a suit assumes junior means replaceable. And Derek? He just signed his name to that assumption. I scheduled a meeting with HR for the next morning. Walked in early, coffee in hand, and asked them to pull performance reviews for everyone on that list, and cross-reference them with my team's internal efficiency metrics. The numbers didn't lie. Luis had cut processing errors in half in his first 3 months. He built a new intake form that saved us 2 hours a week across 5 departments. Meanwhile, one of the senior strategists, Derek, wanted to keep had missed 4 deadlines and blamed the coffee machine twice. I compiled a report. Color-coded. Bulletproof. With receipts. Then I flagged one more thing. By the way, I said to the HR rep, there's a conflict of interest here. Derek Mitchell, the consultant, is my brother. He didn't disclose that before recommending cuts to my team. Her eyebrows did this thing where they briefly tried to escape her face. Noted, she said. I didn't smile. Just said, figured you'd want that on record. Then I walked out. Later that afternoon, my director called me into his office. Now, this man does not do small talk. He once skipped "Happy birthday" in a staff meeting because it wasn't on the agenda. He slid my report across the table. Clean. Smart. Defensive. Thanks. He tapped the page. You're sure about the conflict of interest? Yes. He nodded once. All right, he said. We're pulling Derek's recommendations. Full pause on restructuring. Legal's looped in. I sat there for a second, absorbing it. Not the power. Not the win. The fact that I didn't feel the need to run home and tell my family. Because I knew exactly how they'd respond. My mom would say, "Isn't HR just gossip with paperwork?" My dad would joke, "You didn't overreact, did you?" And Derek? He'd spin it into some tale about office politics and fake loyalty. So I said nothing. Again. And when Derek showed up the next day, marching into the building like a rooster who hadn't yet noticed the axe, I just held the door open for him. He barely nodded. By lunchtime, I heard the news. His contract had been paused pending review. His badge access was set to expire by Friday. He walked past my desk once around 3 p.m., jaw tight, eyes forward. No snark. No smirk. Just silence. That night I got a text from him. "Derek, they froze my contract. You know anything about that?" Me. "They reviewed your proposal. Didn't meet standards." Derek. "This wasn't personal, Eli." Me. "Wasn't for me either." Then I muted the thread. He didn't reply. At the next Sunday dinner, he didn't show up. First time in years. My mom said he had a client emergency. My dad just muttered about overbooked consultants. They didn't ask what I'd been up to. They never did. But I didn't sit quiet this time. "I saved a kid's job this week," I said, slicing into the roast. My mom blinked. "What do you mean?" "Someone tried to cut him for optics." I pushed back. "Report. Audit. Whole thing." She smiled, confused. "That's nice, honey. Always good to be a team player." I didn't explain further. Because I realized something important. If they didn't see it by now, they never would. And that was fine. Because Louise saw it. My team saw it. My boss saw it. And soon, so would legal. Because Derek had filed one last report before his contract was paused. And at the bottom? He'd listed his own recommended efficiency cuts, half of which I'd already fixed before he even walked in the door. Sometimes you don't have to fight someone directly. You just let their own paperwork undo them. 2 weeks later, the restructuring finally moved forward, minus Derek, minus his firm, and minus every one of his short-sighted proposals. HR asked me to sit in on the replacement committee. Not just as a courtesy. As a stakeholder. I showed up with a folder labeled Revised Organizational Flow. Inside? A leaner, cleaner department map, new hybrid positions to reduce redundancy, and one handwritten sticky note taped to the front. "Louis stays." It was approved in under an hour. Later that week, Louis got an official offer, permanent role, title bump, benefits. He stared at the email like it was a prank. "Wait, this is real?" "You earned it," I said. He didn't cry. But he blinked a lot. The same day, my manager pulled me into a room with HR and the director. "We've been discussing your role," they said. I braced myself. I'd been bracing since the day I got the mailroom badge. They continued. "You've effectively been leading logistics strategy for 6 months. Your initiatives cut waste by nearly 20%. You've trained staff. Optimized systems. So we want to make it official." They slid a folder across the table. New title, Head of Logistics Operations, North Division. Salary bump. Team of 15. Relocation budget if I wanted to build out a second hub. I stared at the offer. Then I laughed. Just a little. Because 5 years ago, I was literally sorting bubble mailers and trying not to get paper cuts. And now? I was the final stop for every routing decision in the northern branch of Talridge Logistics. After I signed, the HR rep said, "You'll need to finalize some of the terminations Derek recommended." I blinked. "You mean?" She nodded. "The old list is invalid. But some of his team? We're cutting ties. You'll be reviewing final notices." I sat with that for a minute. Then opened the file. Guess whose name sat right at the top? Derek Mitchell, external consultant. I didn't rush. I reviewed every line like it was sacred scripture. And when I signed the authorization form, I didn't smile. But I did tap the page once with my pen. Because some things deserve punctuation. That Sunday, I skipped dinner. Instead, I sent a group email. Just 3 lines. Subject update. Got a promotion. Officially head of logistics. Hope everyone's doing well. Mom replied 6 hours later. Wow, sweetie! So proud. That's such a big step. Maybe we can all get together soon. Derek didn't reply. Dad sent a thumbs up. Classic. But 2 days later, I got a LinkedIn notification. Derek viewed your profile. Then again. And again. 3 times in 1 week. Guess he figured it out. I changed my headline to Head of Logistics, Tail Ridge, former mailroom clerk, still climbing. No hard feelings. But I knew he read it. At work, I moved into a new office, corner of the floor, big window, glass door. I kept the old badge on a hook next to my monitor. A reminder. Louise brought in donuts that said boss, in frosting. My team started calling me short, simple, respected. But the best part? No one treated me like background noise anymore. Because I wasn't. I was the one signing the papers now. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the next week. Or the one after that. No dramatic exit. No passive-aggressive texts. Just silence. I was busy, genuinely. But I was also tired of pretending. Tired of smiling while Derek acted like I was still collecting stamps and Mom asked if I'd considered going back to school, maybe get a real degree. So I opted out. 3 weeks in, I got a call from my mom. She opened with her signature blend of guilt and confusion. Eli, honey, everything okay? You haven't been around. Yeah, I said, flipping through shipment audits. Work's just been a lot. Well, she said, drawing the word out. Your brother's been going through a rough patch. He hasn't been himself lately. Huh, I said. Wonder why that is. She hesitated. He mentioned some issues with a client, something about contracts getting frozen? Sounds like a mess. Yeah, I said, pretending I hadn't authorized that freeze with a black gel pen and a tiny, satisfied sigh. She continued. We were hoping you could come by this weekend. Just to keep the peace. Maybe talk to him? I paused. Then, as gently as I could, said, I don't think Derek wants to talk to me. Silence. Did something happen? She asked. I laughed softly. Mom. A lot of things happened. You just never really asked? We didn't speak much after that. Until the company's end-of-quarter event. It was held at the downtown convention center, one of those grand affairs with LED walls and coffee stations that cost more than used cars. I wasn't going to attend at first. But then I saw the guest list. Corporate partners. Media reps. Even a couple of clients from Derek's old firm. And, rumor had it, Derek himself. Newly freelance. Trying to network back in. So I showed up. Full suit. Fresh haircut. Badge that said Head of Logistics Operations, North Division in raised lettering. And when I walked into that room, Derek saw me. He was standing near the espresso bar, talking to a client I'd worked with last month. I saw the exact moment it clicked, the second he realized I wasn't just attending. I was hosting. He didn't approach. Just watched as I spoke with department heads, shook hands, answered questions. At one point, I caught him glancing at my nameplate during a panel session. His jaw tightened. The panel wrapped. I stood up. Took one sip of the complimentary latte I didn't even like, and walked straight over to him. Evening, I said. He nodded stiffly. Didn't expect to see you here. I work here. Right. Yeah. We stood in silence for a beat. Then I added, It's good you came. These events can be a great way to meet new companies. He looked at me, confused. I mean, I said, gesturing around. You're not with anyone anymore, right? He didn't answer. So I nodded once, then walked away. I didn't need him to admit anything. His silence said enough. 2 days later, my dad called. Your mother told me about the event, he said. She saw the photos. Said you looked important? Yes, I am, I replied, with no venom. We just didn't know, Eli. You never told us. I did, I said. You just didn't hear me. He sighed. You've always been quiet. And you've always filled that silence with your own assumptions. He didn't argue. Instead, he said, Well, we're proud of you. Truly. It was almost a nice moment. Then he added, So, listen. Your brother's having a tough time. If there's anything you can do. I hung up before he finished. Not out of anger. Just clarity. I wasn't their fallback. Not anymore. It happened at the grocery store. Of all places, that's where the final chapter between me and my family began, next to a tower of discounted canned beans. I was just grabbing lunch for the office. The store was packed, the line was long, and I was mentally debating between Caesar salad or just giving up and calling it a chips and soda kind of day. Then I heard, Eli? I turned. My mom stood there holding a bag of frozen peas like it might save her from the awkwardness. Next to her was Derek, in jeans and a wrinkled polo, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. I nodded. Hey. She gave me a tight smile. We haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, I said. Been busy. Derek didn't speak. He just looked drained. Not the cocky consultant. Just a guy who'd run out of people to impress. Mom filled the silence. Your father's been asking about you. I raised an eyebrow. Did he lose my number? Or just didn't feel like dialing it? She ignored that. We were actually hoping to talk. About everything. Maybe over dinner? Why now? I asked. Because LinkedIn told you I'm worth bragging about again? She looked wounded. Derek still didn't speak. I sighed. Look. I'm not mad. Really. I just don't owe you an explanation. We're still your family, she said quietly. I nodded. And I still sort mail, right? Her face froze. I used to think that was the worst thing you could say to me. I continued. But now, it's kind of poetic. Derek finally spoke. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I just think I'm finally where I belong. And it's not standing here trying to convince you I've made it. They didn't stop me when I walked away. They didn't call later. And I didn't look back. Back at the office, I had a meeting with HR. Final paperwork for vendor restructuring. New consultants. Clean slate. As I flipped through the forms, I found the old termination documents from Derek's firm. They'd been processed, scanned, archived. Still had my signature at the bottom. I printed one copy. Framed it. Hung it above my desk, just under my old badge. A little reminder of where I started. Mailroom clerk. And where I am now. Head of logistics. But mostly, a guy who signed off on his own family's exit, calmly, quietly, and with perfect formatting.